Hello and welcome to the Tech Professor channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing installation and assembly as well as some performance stats for the EK Waterblock M.2 NVMe Heatsink. Alright, so it comes in a box that looks like this. What you have to know is the box is quite small. I put some change there to give you an idea what it looks like. So what's in the box? Well, it comes with this handy dandy installation card. You get one heatsink, one backplate, 1/2 millimeter thermal pad, 1 millimeter thermal pad, and 2 clips to hold the whole thing together. So when you empty the box out, everything comes nicely wrapped. You got your instruction card, your 1/2 millimeter thermal pad, your 1/2 millimeter thermal pad, your 1 millimeter thermal pad, your heatsink and backplate, your clips. So let's take a look at the heatsink and the backplate. So looking further, it's a basic assembly with some cutouts on the backplate to align with your M.2 drive. So that backplate has these aluminum fins right here. Comes with a cover, looks pretty nice, comes in multiple colors. I chose black to match with my motherboard. It's 23 millimeters wide, just wider than the 22 millimeter SSD or M.2 SSD. 76 millimeters long. Note that it's just a bit shorter than the 80 millimeter length of the M.2 drive because it gives enough room for the teeth to go into the M.2 slot, and about 5 millimeters tall for the heatsink. Here I just show that the measurements are pretty much on par with 23, 76, and about 5 tall. For the back plate, it's roughly the same dimensions except it's only about 1 millimeter tall, 23 wide. But what you'll notice on this back plate is there's notches, right? So there's this notch right here for your screw to secure your M.2 or the whole assembly to that M.2 screw. And you don't want to cover this with your thermal pad because then you won't be able to get the screw in the socket to secure your M.2 drive. Also here, these are cutouts for the clip notches when you put the whole assembly together. Alright, thermal pads. One thing to note about these thermal pads is that they give you a lot more than you need, so you're going to have to cut them. So generally you want to cut the 1/2 millimeter one a little bit shorter than the 1 millimeter one. So also to note, there's one sticky side to the pads. What I did is I wound up using that sticky side and applied it to the heatsink. So you'll notice here the heatsink one is cut exactly to 76 millimeters. And this one's cut a little bit short, so this one's roughly about 72 millimeters because I had to make room for this little notch right here. Then the clips are actually made of steel, and they're about 6 millimeters long, so going this way I made them long, about 23.9 millimeters wide, so a little bit wider than the assembly so they can hook on. 23.9 and about 9 millimeters tall, so going this way would be about 9 millimeters. Not nanometers, millimeters. All right, here I took out my M.2 SSD. Note that this heatsink only works for SSDs or M.2 drives that only have their components on one side of the stick. Most of them are like this, most of them will qualify for this. But what you should note too is that you want to remove any stickers or anything that's on top of your memory modules, because that's going to create poorer heat transfer. You want the thermal pads to be directly on the memory modules like so, and when you assemble the whole thing, you want to take these steps. So first thing you should do is unbox everything, but cut your thermal pads. So I cut the 1mm one to exactly 76 millimeters, so it fit perfectly on the heatsink. And then the 0.5 millimeter thermal pad I cut roughly between 70 and 72 millimeters, which makes room for the screw notch. Apply the 1mm pad to the sticky part to the heatsink, and then the 0.5 millimeter pad to the back plate, making room for the screw notch. Make a sandwich, so you take everything, put it together, so your memory's facing up towards the heatsink, or the memory modules are facing up towards the heatsink, and the back plate is aligned with the screw notch properly put at the top end of the SSD. And then when you think about it, you have to make sure that you hook the clips in a certain order. What I did was I latched one side and then pulled the clip underneath and pulled it up onto the top. So you have to repeat that for both clips. So 5 and 6 you do for each clip, and then you're pretty much done. And so what it looks like kind of fully assembled is this. I didn't remove the foil for this photo, but I did remove it when I put it in my system. And so roughly you're looking at still roughly about 80 millimeters. So the length doesn't change as long as you assemble everything according and tightly together. From the side view, you can see here the 0.5 millimeter pad is right here between the back plate and the SSD, and then the 1 millimeter pad is on top of my memory modules and between the heatsink, and the clips are in the right area. Here it looks like from the one end. So you notice here it's roughly about 12 or 10 millimeters tall, 12 to 13 I would say. I mean, this is a poor shot, but it looks like it's between 13 and 11. Really not that much more clearance you would need. Here it fit perfectly in my system. Just to give you an idea how tall it looks like after it's kind of all put together. So the big part of this video is all about performance, and I was just surprised at how much this reduced the temperatures of the drive. And so what I did for this, a quick and dirty task, so I had CrystalDiskMark run 5 iterations of 32 GIB. You'll note on the left side, this is stock, and this is with the EK. Performance pretty much was negligible. One thing you might note is that this is an SSD, and so when you run 5 iterations of this depth, it consumes the cache in the drive, and so your write speeds go way down. Now, obviously, if I were just to do 1 iteration of this, the write speeds would be up there with 450, 475. But basically, exactly performance, where the real difference helps out here is in thermals. And so here is what we found with the same run. So in blue is the stock, and in orange is when the heatsink, the EK heatsink was applied. I have on this side, I have our raw values in degrees Celsius, and then I have delta C. And so delta C is just basically your raw values subtracted by the ambient temperature. For all intents and purposes, the ambient temperature was controlled. It was between 19 and 20 degrees C. So what you're noticing is about a 19.5 degree difference with the water block, with the EK heatsink on. That is huge, 19.5 degrees roughly. And so our delta C here, after taking into account ambient temperature, stock with just nothing on the SSD, we're running about 36, 37 degrees over ambient or above ambient. But with that heatsink on, we only increase about 19 degrees over ambient. And so that is a roughly a 19.5 degree drop in temperature when we have this heatsink on. I think that's just crazy, crazy, crazy good. You'd be stupid not to buy this. It's on Amazon for, I believe, $18. Amazon Prime's free shipping. It arrived in 2 days. Easy upgrade. I highly recommend it for your M.2 SSDs. And kind of to put the crown on the champion of heatsinks, I think this thing definitely deserves the crown right now for a passive cooler on top of your M.2 SSDs. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.